In our series called What Day Is It Anyway?, we've talked about why we have 7 days in a week and why we celebrate Sunday as a day of rest. And today we're going to talk about why we observe Saturday as the Sabbath. Now, when my daughter was little, she had a doll that she really loved. It was her favorite doll. And so one day, I went out and I got the doll a little house. Well, she loved that dollhouse. And then for Christmas, she got a little kitchen set for the dollhouse. She was so excited. She took all the food and she put it in the cupboards and in the refrigerator of this little dollhouse. And then she would get her little play dishes and she would set the table and she would play for hours with her dollhouse and her little kitchen set. As she got a little older, she got a little play set for outside for her dolls. And it had a little table and chairs. And so she would take her dolls and she would set them at the table and chairs outside and they would have tea parties for hours. My daughter loved that little tea party set. Well, one day I was out in the yard and she was having a tea party with her dolls. And I said, "Who's that? Who are you having tea party with?" And she said, "Oh, this is the Queen of England, and this is Princess Diana, and this is Mother Teresa." So I said, "Wow, what an eclectic group you have here for your tea party." And she said, "Well, they're all ladies, and it's a girls' tea party." And then she looked up at me and she said, "Can we invite Jesus to the tea party?" And I said, "He'd love to come to your tea party, but he has something he has to do on Saturday." And she said, "Why does he have to do that?" And I said, "Well, because he made the world, and he set aside Saturday as a special day to rest and to spend time with his family, and I think he wants us to do the same thing. When God created the world, after he finished creating everything, including people, the Bible says that he rested. And then he blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, it says that by the seventh day, God had finished his work which he had done, and he ceased, or he rested from all his work which he had done. And then it says in verse 3 that God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, or made it holy, because that in it he had rested from all his work which he had done in creation. So the first thought that comes to mind when you read that is that God just needed a day off. I mean, I get it. If you work all week, Monday through Friday, you look forward to the weekend. You need a day to rest. And I think that's part of what the Sabbath is all about. The Bible says in Mark chapter 2, verse 27, the Sabbath was made for man, for man's benefit. So it wasn't just so that God could have a day off. It was so that people could have a day to rest and to do what you will, but it says not to do good. When my daughter had her tea parties, she didn't use that time to nag her dolls or berate her dolls or yell at her dolls. She used that time to have fun with her dolls. We want to use the Sabbath for what it was intended for rest, for being with our families, for fellowship, for remembering God and thanking God for all that he's done. There's a wonderful hymn that says, "How firm a foundation, ye saints of the Lord, Christ laid for you down in ages past. His death was your substitution, his blood your redemption, freely purchased, fully paid for." So many times throughout history, God's people have used the Sabbath to remember what Jesus did for us, not just on the cross but in his life. The miracles that he did, the compassion that he had, the way that he treated people. And to remember that, we're called to do the same thing. So, as we observe the Sabbath, may we remember that we're not just observing a day. We're remembering the one who gave us that day, and that's Jesus.